Hey chaps and chapsters, let's talk about a couple of interesting things that are happening in the world. OpenAI raised the latest round of funding, the biggest round of venture funding ever, 6.6 billion I think, at a valuation of 150 billion. All the previous venture rounds failed in comparison. And it's interesting for all sorts of reasons. I want to talk about certain specific details which reveal some of the things which might be happening under the surface. So one of the things that they've demanded, there's no proof of this is all rumor and hearsay, but one of the things that they're demanding from the investors is that they not invest in that five of the biggest competitors. So one is XAI, one is Anthropic, then you got, I think Green was in that list. Yeah, there are a few other companies that were in that list, and they demanded that the investors have a non-compete clause, which is ironic because I think California just passed a law recently removing non-compete clauses, removing a company's ability to have non-compete clauses in its job offer. So yeah, they basically had a version of this, which I've never heard. I think Uber did this for their investors, and that restricted that competition, especially Lyft. But apart from that, you don't see this kind of a thing. And another thing which has come out is that they are not going to, this basically shows that they want to be the first. This reminds me of that meme, Silicon Valley meme, where Gavin Belson, he's saying that I don't want to live in a world in which someone else is making the world a better place better than we are. Which is very funny because I alwast feel that on some level. Like there's certain things that I don't know. Yeah, it's just a very egocentric way of, wanting to make an impact. But yeah, if your ego's attached to that impact, then you're not really caring as much about the impact as you ideally should be. Right. I mean, we're not perfectly altruistic creatures, I get that. But when the stakes are so high, you'd expect some of these impulses to be reined in a bit more than they would be. But that is what happens, right? Like, this reveals, when you look at the initial charter, the founding charter, they stated that if competing companies were closer to the AGI goal than we are, then we would pool with them, we would work with them, we would give up on our pursuits, and we would just pool resources to get to the mission of. The mission isn't that we get to AGI first, the mission is that humanity gets to AGI as soon as possible, save AGI as soon as possible, right? And with this, they'll basically kick that notion out of the charter in all but words. And what that reveals is that, when it comes to power, when it comes to this kind of power, and we've never seen the size of this prize is as great as it's ever been. We're talking of trillions of dollars. We're talking of global hegemony. We're talking of your systems being a part of every single industry, every single domain, right? We cannot fathom the impact that a truly generally intelligent system will have on the planet, on all our ways of doing, being, working, creating, making meaning. Every single thing, every single facet of our life will be touched by this. And so that has got to have some effects on the psychology of people who are wielding this, or who feel that they're wielding this power. So I think we're observing the dynamics of, I don't want to say greed or power corrupting people, but having its say on how people start making decisions as we get closer and closer to this audacious goal. The plan is to raise 100 billion more, which would be astonishing by any standards, before the end of the year, before 2025. And they need to do that because if you just go back, I think it was a year back. Was it? I don't think it was a year back. It was like 5-6 months back, where Sam Altman, he went on this global tour, and one of the things that he's the greatest at is, getting people's buy-in in big visions, be it YC, be it Helion, where he's working on nuclear fusion, or be it OpenAI. And that ability of getting people's buy-in, getting people's confidence, getting people's belief in these big, hairy, audacious goals is like, you don't see that, right? I'll listen to him talk for maybe in total maybe 10 hours, maybe 15 hours at this point. Might be. But I think you don't notice that. Like, he just seems like a normal chap, reasonably smart, but it's not like he can get a glimpse of the past that he has from those conversations. But then you hear people, and then you obviously look at the results that he's been able to get, and you hear people talk about, you hear people like PG talk about how he's just so convincing in his ability to paint these visions, paint these pictures. And yeah, I was listening to a podcast yesterday where someone was drawing this analogy where some people are great at one-on-one conversation, some people are great at crowd work, as in politicians. Some politicians are great at giving speeches. Some, like Ron DeSantis, I think, probably comes to mind. I don't know if he's great at giving speeches, but he's just so awkward in one-to-one conversations, right? A lot of these politicians are like that, and some people are, yeah. So Sam Altman, he might not be great with one-to-one conversations. I mean, he's reasonably good at that, or rather, yeah. So that's an interesting dynamic to observe. I mean, we're talking of $100 billion. We're talking of trillions of dollars being raised over the next 2 to 3 years, and he wants to set up these companies, these semiconductor fab facilities across the globe, especially in the United States, but even in the Middle East. So, interesting times. I want to talk about the Steelman case for why they're worth $150 billion, and the Steelman case for when to make a Steelman case for why they might not be worth it, right? Which one should we start with? Let's just make a case for why they might be worth it. If you look at the potential increase in our GDPs, just with Gen AI, for example, economists at some of the top institutes have made estimates of around 20 to 50% GDP boost across the board, as in total. And so we are talking of the global GDP right now stands at around $90 trillion. Even if it's a measly 20%, you're talking of close to $20 trillion a year. And while it's not going to be a winner-take-all market, it could be. There are scenarios that might eventuate. I don't think that's likely, just based on how commodified these models have become, based on how much talent these other companies have. Like, obviously, OpenAI probably might be the most talent-dense organization. Google might be that, but Google doesn't have the kind of culture, the shipping culture, the innovation culture that OpenAI has. So if you include that into talent density, not just, mental horsepower, intellectual horsepower, but the desire to actually want to build stuff, ship stuff fast, and just try things out, if you combine all of that into one metric, and let's call it talent density, then OpenAI might be the top of the list, right? And then they've got other advantages. They've got 250 million users weekly. I'm sure that they use the conversations that the models have for training the further models. So they've got certain advantages. So that probably would be one advantage. Just, a lot of people probably think of OpenAI as synonymous with AI at this point. That is a huge advantage when you're talking of the scale of billions of users. Then they've obviously got the talent density, so that probably would be the second mode. They're backed by Microsoft, which is a global behemoth, $3 trillion company with connections and partnerships everywhere with governments, with institutions. They've got a huge distribution network because of the Microsoft suite, or rather the Windows suite. So that partnership probably is another factor which would lead one to believe that OpenAI is in a pretty good shape to be worthy of that kind of valuation. What else have we got on the table? Maybe, I don't want to over-index on people, but on individual people, but Sam Altman, obviously, he seems to have a unique ability to get people to believe in these visions, which I don't think Ilya would be as effective or Murati would be as effective as that. So yeah, being able to paint those visions, and because at the end of the day, one of the biggest bottlenecks to whether a company is going to win this game or not is how much they can raise, right? Because they won't be able to get to this through revenue. It's just not going to happen. It's all going to happen in the raising. Yeah, and so that's the game that they're playing at this moment, right? How can we grow in a manner that we can raise more and more? And yeah, Sam Altman seems to be uniquely positioned to be able to raise hundreds of billions. You can't really imagine too many other people being able to do that. So that's another reason. I think those probably would be the core of the reasons. Now let's make a steel man case for why they might not be. They're overhyped, right? They're overinflated. One of the critical reasons is that at this point, the open source models are right on their heels, picking at the heels of the closed source models in many different metrics. And Meta is committed to open source, and Meta's got vast pools of resources. And so when you get that kind of a competitor that has the ability to dilute your revenues substantially and because again, it's obvious that most companies, once deploying open source systems becomes easier once you remove some of those friction points, and there are tons of companies doing great work on that front. Once you remove some of those friction points, most of the companies probably would be more inclined towards open source. Think of it this way, right? AWS is a wrapper on many open source technologies, databases, virtual machines, a ton of stuff, right? And yet, a ton of companies use AWS because of the ease, because of the simplicity. And so, if Meta or other companies, so think of AWS as open source in this example, in this analogy. If you can make things easy, most people would choose not to part way with that, not to have the data being stored in OpenAI silos, not to have having to abide by OpenAI's rules and requirements might not be up to par for a lot of companies. There might be other issues that other companies might have with using OpenAI as a provider. So yeah, that could be a significant reason. Then you got the fact that there are some really compelling competitors in the space. XAI, obviously, they can raise a ton of money because of Elon Musk. Then we go Anthropic, they can raise a ton of money because of the partnership with Amazon. Mistral, again, open source, great work, some absolutely great work. And yeah, so they've got strong competition, and it's not like they might be leaders of the pack from certain vantage points, though obviously when it comes to image generation, they're certainly not. When it comes to video generation, they're certainly not. They haven't even deployed a video model yet, the Sora model yet. So yeah, so that probably would be one of the biggest factors, the OpenAI, the open source thing. And then the other thing would be the executive churn, right? The company seems to be in a position where they don't have the act together. Like, people are just leaving left, right, top executives are leaving left, right, and center. And that doesn't bode well for a company which is going to be wielding so much power, and power can make people behave in all sorts of erratic ways. So yeah, if the company isn't stable, if the company doesn't have stable geniuses, it might not work out. It might just, when faced with the power, when faced with the luminance of AGI, things might just come apart. The wheels might just come off. So I think those would be the key reasons for why the company might be overinflated. I think that's it for the OpenAI. That's enough of an update. I want to talk about the longshoreman strike. I want to talk about it because, not that I find it particularly interesting, it's not going to affect me in any way. Kind of, right? Because I was planning to ship my products to the US, so now maybe the timelines do change. But anyways, the bigger reason why it's interesting is that it's harbinger of the signs to come, of things to come. So there's this bunch of people, longshoremen, it's a union, and they are saying that we want high wages, which is legit, it's a very valid ask, and they also want to ban all automation. and people have been putting up these tweets of ports operating in China which are completely automated. There's a bunch of people who operate the machinery from this lab, from this tech room. There's no humans on the floor, no humans driving the trucks, no humans doing the forklifting stuff, except cranes, except no humans doing that. All of that is either teleoperated or completely automated. And yeah, that would increase productivity substantially. That would free up a ton of capital to be deployed elsewhere. But yeah, so longshoremen, they don't want automation, right? They don't want automation at all. And it's almost like the return of the Luddites, right? And we've seen these kinds of waves throughout history where, a bunch of people, they realize that their livelihood is at risk, and then they take these steps. They put an entire industry in harm's way. They just put everything at a standstill because they can't imagine how they might, adapt to the future. And so they take the easy route out. I also want to obviously be empathetic to their position. Like, I get it. If the generations have been 3-4 generations for many of those people been working in that industry, obviously it's going to come as a shock. A lot of these people, they probably don't really understand. They don't really have the tools to think about to model the future. So again, a lot of this is just governments doing their part to educate people, train people, and governments are notoriously poor at that. Which the strike is a strong reminder to the government, to the institutions, that they have to take training people and they have to take preparing for a post-AGI future very seriously, and has to start now because things are moving very, very fast. When you think of the bottlenecks of growth, there are 3 big bottlenecks. One is the labor bottleneck, and we combine physical labor and intellectual labor in one pool. Then we got energy, and then we got raw material, right? In this case, labor can be automated, but what we need to think about is, sure, we can automate labor, but we're still going to hit upon limits, right? We live on a finite planet, and this is something that accelerationists don't get. Like, they want to convert the entire planet into a factory, and that's something I don't agree with at all. And so when we start seeing people lose their jobs, and we're going to start seeing this happen at a far faster clip than we've ever seen in history, we gotta start questioning. You gotta start asking the questions, right? What are we maximizing for? What's the kind of growth rate that is sustainable in light of the fact that we don't live in an infinite planet, right? The growth rates can become functionally infinite. They're not going to become infinite per se, but they can become functionally unconstrained. I think that's a better descriptor. Once we become a multiplanetary species, right? On our tiny planet, which might be the only planet with life, which might be the only planet with this richness, this diversity of life, we don't want to use this as a factory. We don't want to use this as an industry. And that's why I love the Jeff Bezos vision that he's got, that we use Earth. We don't do any of the heavy industry stuff on Earth. We move all of that off Earth on asteroids and other planets, because all of them are lifeless, right? You can find billions and billions of planets like Mars in the universe. There's no point in conserving Mars. There's no point in conserving Moon. Like, just ravage it like you would ravage the Amazon if you're an industrialist, right? What you don't want to do, what we don't want to allow to happen, is for people to destroy the only planet that we know that sustains this richness of life, right? Over time, obviously, we're going to terraform different planets. We're still going to have our Earth as our, that precious baby, that precious child that's always going to be at the center of our hearts, right? At the center of everything that we do, even when we expand beyond our solar system, beyond our galaxy, which is going to take like thousands of years, if not millions. But yeah, so we gotta start asking these questions. And then that takes me to another question, right? What are we maximizing for? We're maximizing for, the goal of improving people's lives, right? As many people as possible. You're not maximizing when in that Goodhart law, right? When the indicator becomes the when the measure becomes the let me when the measure becomes the target, it ceases to become to be a good measure, right? And what that means essentially is that we don't want to just maximize GDP for the sake of it, because sure we can do that, right? Once we have invented nuclear fusion in 20 years, we could convert, as I said, the entire planet into a factory, catering to increasing productivity, right? But looking at everything from that lens is just so reductive, so simplistic, and so foolish, so short-sighted, and so unholistic that it boggles the mind that there are people, many people at the top of the food chain, think just in those terms. So we don't want to just maximize GDP, we want to maximize the well-being of people. And we know that GDP is one of the biggest couplings with well-being. But they are not the same thing, not even close. And we can decouple them to a large degree. Like Bhutan, for example, they have the cross-national happiness index, and their citizens probably might be some of the happiest citizens in the world. Could be, right? So there are no good objective tests of happiness. But if you were to invent some, I'm pretty sure that Bhutan would be right at the top, because that's what they're prioritizing for. And more than that, they've got the ingredients. They've got beautiful nature around them, beautiful wildlife around them. They are pollution-free, all sorts of pollution, not just physical pollution like air pollution, sound pollution, light pollution, etc., but even pollution of the modern world like internet pollution, societal decay pollution, right? The kinds of things that, there are intellectual pollutants, let's call them that, mental pollutants, emotional pollutants. Now, to a large degree, they are free of them, more than most countries, right? Because they're isolated, sandwiched between India and China. They've got their own strong culture, their Buddhist culture that prioritizes, just learning more about yourself, about your being, about your existence. And that seems to me like a pretty good shot to, the kind of genuine happiness that many people chase in the West through materialistic means but never meet. But anyways, that's besides the point. The point was that we're trying to maximize the well-being of people. And so when we, I saw a lot of takes on Twitter saying that this should just be, we should just automate things away as quickly as possible to teach these people a lesson. I get where those takes are coming from, but they are very short-sighted. They're very stupid. And they're very stupid because just, again, we're doing this for the people, for the greatest many. And we want this transition to be seamless. We want this to be, because it could just, the wheels could come off, right? Because everything is going to change, and everything could change rapidly, but we're not equipped for that kind of a rapid change. We just don't have that kind of mental capacity, emotional capacity. So things have to be ordered, things have to be orderly, things have to be thought out very deeply before we implement these schemes of, offloading labor and replacing it with these AI agents and humanoids. So that's what a lot of governments have to start thinking about very, very deeply now. Now this reminds me, these bunch of people that remind me of, Resistance, right? We've seen this in so many sci-fi movies. Transcendence, which happens to be one of my favorites of all time. There's this bunch of people who resist AI takeover, AGI takeover, and we're going to see many of those movements come about. This is just, again, as I said, the harbinger of things to come. A lot of these movements are going to become super strong. We see that with Gen Z, for example. Many of them are completely opposed to AI. A lot of people, they see, for all sorts of reasons, they don't have the kind of buy-in that a lot of tech-savvy people do. And tech-savvy people, we have to realize this, because tech people tend to get into an echo chamber. They are a tiny, I wouldn't say tiny, but they are certainly a pretty tiny minority, just all things considered. Probably less than 5% of the planet. And so to get the buy-in of the rest of the planet, you have to make things such that they work for the rest of the planet, right? Just for selfish reasons and for reasons of, just being a good citizen. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this time around. I'll catch you soon. Thanks for the time. Cheers. Bye.